Okay, I'm continuing my reading here. What I'm doing in this series is read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am reading in a chronological order of events, not according to publication or volume, so I will be skipping around just a little bit as I move along. Let me adjust that just slightly. And right now, I'm in the Book of Numbers. This will be chapter 30. But as you may know, my son is still here with me, so you may hear him in the background. So, chapter 30. Vows and oaths must be kept. Fathers may disallow vows of daughters, and husbands disallow vows of wives. And Moses spake unto the heads of the tribes concerning the children of Israel, saying, This is the thing which the Lord hath commanded. If a man vow a vow unto the Lord, or swear an oath to bind his soul with a bond, he shall not break his word. He shall do according to all according to all that proceedeth out of his mouth. If a woman also vow a vow unto the Lord, and bind herself by a bond, being in her father's house in her youth, and her father hear her vow, and her bond wherewith she hath bound her soul, and her father shall hold his peace at her, then all her vows shall stand, and every bond wherewith she hath bound her soul shall stand. But if her father disallow her in the day that he heareth, not any of her vows or of her bonds wherewith she hath bound her soul shall stand. And the Lord shall forgive her, because her father disallowed her. And if she had at all an husband, when she vowed, or uttered aught out of her lips, wherewith she bound her soul, and her husband heard it, and held his peace at her in the day that he heard it, then her vows shall stand, and her bonds wherewith she bound her soul shall stand. But if her husband disallowed her on the day that he heard it, then he shall make her vow which she vowed, and that which she uttered with her lips, wherewith she bound her soul, of none effect, and the Lord shall forgive her. But every vow of a widow, and of her that is divorced, wherewith they have bound their souls, shall stand against her. And if she vowed in her husband's house, or bound her soul by a bond with an oath, and her husband heard it, and held his peace at her, and disallowed her not, then all her vows shall stand, and every bond wherewith she bound her soul shall stand. But if her husband hath utterly made them void on the day he heard them, then whatsoever proceeded out of her lips concerning her vows, or concerning the bond of her soul, shall not stand. Her husband hath made them void, and the Lord shall forgive her. Every vow and every binding oath to afflict the soul, her husband may establish it, or her husband may make it void. But if her husband altogether hold his peace at her from day to day, then he establish all her vows, or all her bonds which are upon her. He confirmeth them, because he held his peace at her in the day that he heard them. But if he shall any ways make them void after that he hath heard them, then he shall bear her iniquity. These are the statutes which the Lord commanded Moses between a man and his wife, between the father and his daughter, being yet in her youth in her father's house. So let us look at this. That's the entire chapter, nice short chapter. But a lot of people in the modern day get all angry at this, that the father has control over the daughter, or the husband over his wife. This is all viewed as this great oppression. But you've got to understand a couple of things. I'm sorry, I'm picking at my jacket. I think I lost a button and I'm a little distracted by it. But you got to remember a couple of things. First of all, in these ancient days, if a woman makes a vow and does not keep it, most often it was the husband or the father who was held liable for it. So in other words, if a daughter goes out and borrows money and makes a contract to pay it back by a certain time, when the contract comes due, they don't come after the daughter, they come after the father. And he has to pay it back. Same thing with a wife if she takes out a loan. or if she promises to do any service and fails to do it, the law comes after the husband, not after the wife. So this is God saying, look, if the husband is the head of the household, if the father is the head of the house, he has to have this authority because he has to have the responsibility. He takes responsibility. The father takes full responsibility for his family, and the husband takes full responsibility for his family, for his wife. They are the ones that are held legally responsible for it. Now, you got to also understand this. The other thing is that this isn't just saying a man has this right to, he can't force his wife or his daughter to take a vow. This is if they choose to vow, then the father or the husband can disallow, can say, no, we're not doing that. He can't force the woman to do anything, but he can say, we're not holding you. No, that's a stupid vow. Don't do it. You'll also note that he only has the right to do that when he first learns about the vow being taken. And he doesn't, it's not, this isn't something saying, well, he has to say, no, you can't, no, it's not going to stand, or he has to say, yes, it will. He doesn't have to say it will stand. He just has to stay silent, and it stands. And if he tries to disallow it after the first time he hears it, if I hear the vow, now, my wife makes a vow, and say I find out about it 2 days later. She makes a vow when I'm not there, and 2 days later I find out about it. On that day that I find out about it, I can say, no, we're not doing that. She is absolved of that because that is not what we're doing. And God will say, okay. The husband said, we're not doing that. We'll just nullify that. But if I heard about it, and then like a day or two later, I come back and say, we're not doing that, she is still exempt because the husband has disallowed it. However, in this case, the husband is now guilty, or the father, as the case may be. So I can still, as a husband, I can disallow it whenever I want. But if I do it the first day, when I first learn about it, it's clear, everything's good. If I do it after that, if I wait and then try and disallow it, then I become guilty. Now, if I let it stand, if I say nothing and it stands, then she becomes liable. I am saying I am upholding her vow. Now she is liable. This is the law of God. As the head of the household, the father or husband has the right to say no. But he only has that right once. If he says yes, then the woman is fully responsible. If he gives his consent, if he says, good, that's fine, you do that, she is now responsible for upholding that vow. If he says no on the first day, then nobody's responsible. But if he says no after the first day, he's responsible. And honestly, I will probably talk about this later, especially when we get into, way in the future with the Doctrine and Covenants and some of the, or even in the New Testament, some of the laws, some other laws that come up. So we'll touch on it a little bit more on the rights and responsibilities of husbands and fathers, because it is an important thing to note. And I just want to make this one last comment here. The reason that the father or the husband has this right to disallow the vows is because they have the responsibility of caring for their daughters and their wives. They are responsible for the women's welfare. And if they're going to be responsible for the welfare, they have to have the authority to declare what is and what isn't right, or what isn't good for their welfare. That's what this is about. This is about me as a husband fulfilling my responsibility to keep my wife safe. And if she wants to go and do something that I feel I cannot keep her safe from, or during, or whatever, then I have to have the right to say, no, you can't do that because I cannot guarantee your safety if you do. And the same thing with fathers. If a daughter comes to her father and says, I've just made a vow to marry this man, the father, in a marriage, the father is literally giving his responsibility to care for his daughter. He is turning that responsibility over to the husband, to the future husband. When they get married, he's saying, you now carry that responsibility. The father then has to have the right to decide if that man is capable of taking on the responsibility before he gives the responsibility over. And therefore, he has to have the ability to disallow the vow. These are things that, in order to fulfill the responsibilities of a husband and father, there are certain rights that you have to have in order to do it. If you strip the rights of the father or husband, then you also have to strip the responsibility. You cannot hold them liable if you do not give them the ability to fulfill what they are supposed to do. That is what this is talking about. That is why this is in the law. Because fathers and husbands are responsible for certain things. And in order to carry out that responsibility, they have to have certain rights. Anyways, we'll see you in the next one.